Oh,
Right, you're live.
We are live now.
yes.
All right. Welcome to the April 22nd, 2020, excuse me, the May 13th, 2021 BAR small virtual meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slambrook. The other board members present this afternoon are Julia Martin, Bill Huey, Eddie Bello, and Hunter Kennedy. The staff present are Tori Parrish, Linda Bennett, and Kim Lavin. The order of the meeting today will be as follows. An introduction overview of the project by city staff for the benefit of the board and the public, followed by a presentation by the applicant. There will be a 10-minute time limit on this presentation. Any questions of the board can be answered by the applicant during this time. Any and all presenters, please state your first and last name clearly for the record. Any persons affiliated with the project, such as owners, developers, designers, architects, consultants, please during this period versus public comment. Following the applicant's presentation, we'll go to public comment. Again, if you are speaking as a member of the public, please state your name first and last clearly for the record. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations, followed by a period of applicant response. This is for the purpose of clarifying or responding to specific questions, not for reopening the applicant's presentation. Once we hear from the applicant, we'll go into board discussion and a vote. The applicant presentation is closed at this time, and so is public comment. This is just a period for the board to debate and discuss and eventually vote. The following items have been withdrawn or deferred today. Let's see. It's 60 Meeting Street, 4 Lowndes Street, 35 Ashton Street, 37 Ashton Street, and 2 Council Street. Please turn off all cell phones and other devices, please, so you do not disrupt this meeting. And please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, they are not within the purview of this board and they may not be voiced here. I will turn it over to Kim now for some virtual meeting protocol.
Thank you, Lindsay. Staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given the capabilities to speak when they're called upon during the public comment period. Chat and the Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. Public comment. The applicants, all team members, and the public have been required to register, indicate the project that they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you'll need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. For the board, board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they're ready to return to the regular meeting. The results and staff comments will be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. These proceedings are being recorded and broadcasted to the City of Charleston's YouTube channel.
Kim. We'll go to the first item on the agenda, 35 Devereaux Avenue. Kim, if you would give your introduction.
Thank you. 35 Devereaux Avenue is requesting final approval for demolition. The building is not rated in the Wagner Terrace neighborhood, circa 1970, and in the historic materials demo purview. Here's an aerial image just for your context and familiarity. And a close-up. There's a site image of the house here, looking south and further south down Devereaux, looking north. And if we have Ms. Wilson here. Heather, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Heather, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. And I should leave the video off, correct?
You can turn it on if you'd like.
Oh, okay. Okay, hi. All right, thank you for your time. I know most of you saw the property today, so I'll move through it fairly quickly. I do want to start by, briefly going over the history of why we're here today. And the homeowners bought the house with the full intention of rehabbing it, renovating it, and living in the home. And we're drawn to, the low-slung nature of the house. At the time, the flood zone went through the house and it was below flood by a foot. And so the original plan was to add a foot to the interior finished floor and lift the roof. That was going to be the request. That's really what triggered most of the structural engineer's comments in the letter that he's got before you, and that any alterations to this property were going to be very difficult because of the sheathing and the lack of shear strength behind the veneer brick, and the state of the foundation, or the lack of foundation, was not going to be adequate to add to or really renovate the home in any meaningful way. And so that sort of started the conversation about what best to do. And at the time, during all of this, the flood maps did change, and this is in a very unusual situation in that the house is currently technically in an X zone, but it's 8 to 10 feet from a V zone, which is 4 feet above the finished floor of this house. So it is in a slightly precarious and unusual position. It's also unusual relative to the adjacent homes in that it is at grade. So at the rear of the house, because the back of the house is a drop floor, it's flush with the grade. And so there really is no protection from storm water, both rain and surging. So that's really the big issues that we're wrestling with. And so, while acknowledging that there is a well-storied history to Mr. Gadsden living in the home and to Mr. DaCosta building the home, we don't think that it's probably some of Mr. DaCosta's best work, and is lacking in a lot of details that are worth some of the extra effort that would be required to kind of keep it and maintain it as it is. And he also used this brick as a salvaged material, and we plan to do the same. So the brick will stay on site. I know that the finished or the proposal for the new construction is not in your purview, but I think it's very important that we share that we plan to, maintain almost the footprint almost in its entirety, to also do a one-story home, to reuse the brick, to honor the past with a new home that is very much, we think, in keeping with the neighborhood. And while there is a huge range of homes in this area, we don't think that this is emblematic of any particular style that's significant for the area. It's not been registered in any way or noted in any way for its architectural value. And as you can see in this picture, the roof is in need of repair and new materials, and most of the fascia and frieze is in poor condition and would be replaced. So there's very little that we're talking about aside from, you know, the massing and the location, which we, as I said, intend to honor, and then the material, which we also intend to use, just as Mr. DaCosta did when he first built the home. So I think, Kim, we could go through the slides. I know some of them aren't germane, but I think it's worth seeing all of them, and then I'm here to answer any questions. So that's an overview. I know we're not allowed to. This is a presentation I put together for the Wagner Terrace Association. So I don't want to bore you by reading it, and a lot of it is what I've you know, touched on. But again, going back to that height, if we raise the foot inside, either to give it protection from grade as it is, regardless of flood, we're looking at a 7'9" ceiling height, and lifting that ceiling opens up that frieze and, you know, would create a condition where we would need to add brick to a brick wall. So in addition to the complexity structurally, I think architecturally it creates an odd condition of feathering in old brick on top of the, you know, existing brick. And then some other issues which are pointed out in the structural engineer's letter. So I won't bore you with reading you that, as I'm sure you have seen it and heard it. So we can keep going. This is the water. This is, again, what I touched on already. It's in an unusual little island of an X zone adjacent to a V zone on the same property. You can go through these pretty, I think, quickly. This was just indicating, you know, what you all know and what we're all up against and struggling with here on the peninsula. So I won't keep going to. And that's a diagram. That one's probably most material. If you could back up one, Kim, because it's if you look at the bottom of the existing house, that really shows what we're up against. And that the orange line in the existing section is what we were going to try and achieve in order to protect it from the A zone. And then the red line on the right is, you know, the minimum finish at the, you know, in the middle of the yard. So that's the that kind of tells the story of what we're looking at, and at what point investing in the restoration does it make sense. Now I will say that in the proposed section, even though we're not going and don't plan to go all the way up, we're just looking for a few feet of protection from groundwater.
Thank you,
That was really, yeah, that that last one shows you that's a similar house next door. The roof is about, you know, 30 to 40 inches lower, the ridge, and you can see that that has flood vents and it's on a elevated slab. So this was the only one in the area that I could find that's truly just slab on grade that has no elevation to it whatsoever. These were just some neighborhood context pictures. These are pictures, and I know you all saw them, so we can move through them, but this was just some of the damage that's happened to the house just with the grade and the rain. It's splash, we know, but it's still, because that is the sill into the finished floor of the house. So there's been a lot of deterioration. That was where we did some excavating to determine if there, you know, the size of the footing, which is referenced in the engineer's letter, and then the sheathing that's does not provide the shear, it's crumbling. Engineer's letter. These were a few pictures just to show the range of homes that are in the area, and I know this isn't part really of your purview, but again, it's what we drew from, and also looking to what is very typical of the neighborhood in terms of the elevation relative to the street. Kim, I know you said you had to blaze through those, so that's fine.
Heather,
But they're
you've got
trying
about
to.
a minute left.
Okay, yeah, well, this is how I finished. I was just trying to show that, we are really drawing from the, without mimicking the original home, we are drawing from it in scale and design, and then again, salvaging that brick and reusing it just as they did, 52 years ago. We wanted to do, honor the material and the home in that way. That you could probably leave it on either of those, as they're probably most material to the board's discussion. Those are the existing home.
Thanks, Heather. Do we have any questions from the board at this time, board members? All right, moving on to public comment. Okay. Kim, I'm seeing first on the list is Doug Warner speaking.
Mr. Warner, if you are here, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Doug Warner. I'm a resident at 45 Pendleton Street. I've been in the neighborhood for over 20 years, both at 30 Pendleton, 15 Devereaux, just down the street from this house, and now back to Pendleton at 45, which is where I live. I'm also on the city's 3x3 committee looking at sea level rise and the proposed Corps of Engineer wall around the peninsula to kind of mitigate sea level rise and flooding. And so I know a lot about this house and a lot about the neighborhood and a lot about some of the issues that we're facing. And I urge the board to support the homeowners in their request for demolition. And again, I know the house and have for over 20 years. It is in bad shape. What they are trying to do keeps with the character of the neighborhood and is being good stewards of the property. And so I would just like to lend my support as a neighbor to what they're planning to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Next, we have Erin Minnigan.
Thank you. Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. First, we'd like to thank the applicant for reaching out to us. Under the ordinance, the BAR is charged with considering certain criteria for demolition applications, including the architectural features of a structure, the character of the surrounding area, the historic and culturally important use of the structure, and its importance to the city. There are unique factors about this property that warrant special consideration by the board under these criteria. Specifically, it is notable the structure was designed and built by prominent local African-American architect and contractor Herbert A. DaCosta for Tobias Gadsden, who was a significant African-American community figure and politician serving in the South Carolina House of Representatives. The house is constructed of salvaged historic brick and located on a piece of land that is, quote, not filled or reclaimed, as noted in the 1950s advertisement for this property in the News and Courier. Plans by DaCosta for 35 Devereaux on file with the Avery Research Center reveal the house is intact from its original date of construction. While we acknowledge the building does not represent a remarkable example of mid-century architecture, it is consistent with the character of the neighborhood and directly relates to other buildings on the street built in the same era. The engineer's letter submitted with the demolition application speaks only to the building not meeting current code, which is very common for historic buildings. And we feel more evidence is needed to support the request for demolition. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Next, Kevin Eberly.
There we go. Okay, well, obviously, my name is Kevin Eberly. I live at 367 President Street. I am totally opposed to the demolition of this building. I'm familiar with the house and obviously a lot of the earlier cases where the board has justified demolition of historic buildings in the uptown, none of which applies in this case. And I thought I would just tick through very quickly a few of those. Number one, the house is a really nice example of contributing architecture. And while most of Wagner Terrace, which is an enormous neighborhood, was built out before and during the World War II era, this particular area, known as Peachtree Heights, was not developed until the 1950s through the 1970s. So to compare it and to look for examples in other parts of the neighborhood, it makes no sense. But just walking up and down the street, you can see that several of the neighbors have that same horizontal brick ranch style. It's really actually a very nice example of that style and is in total keeping with the neighborhood. Number two, as you just heard from Aaron, it's got a strong historical connection that is worth saving. Tobias Gadsden was a barber by trade, but he's actually got a very strong connection to the Charleston civil rights era. He was one of the organizers of the very earliest social justice movements in Charleston. And because of his work, helped move Charleston County Council, among other boards, from being 100% white to having any racial diversity for the first time ever. And in fact, when he died in 1984, Tobias Gadsden Boulevard over in West Ashley was named in his honor because of his work with disadvantaged communities. So he is a significant player. Three, not only was he notable, but as you also heard, so was the contractor. Herbert DaCosta was the man who was selected to build the house, and he was the most important contractor working in Charleston in the 60s and 70s. His family business was responsible for most of the important restoration projects in Charleston. He was a frequent lecturer about Charleston architecture and preservation, and even was a member of the Board of Architectural Review starting in 1976. I think he actually may have been the first African-American member, but I'm not totally sure about that. The house has an interesting architect who also happens to be Herbert DaCosta. He was a contemporary of Carl Boone, but unlike Mr. Boone, he actually worked as an architect too. And I went over and researched the house at the Avery Research Center one afternoon and looked through the entire file, all of which is there. And the original blueprints show that there are almost no changes whatsoever to this building. The windows, which are really nice, horizontal windows, the chimneys, the flower beds, even the shutters on the house are all exactly as they appear in the blueprints. There's really no reason to tear it down. As you've already heard, the flood zone is true for literally every property on the peninsula. There is no house on the peninsula that is in a better flood zone than X. So I don't know really what more to say about that. And then lastly, there's strong community support for saving the house. I know the neighborhood association had listened to the architect and voted to endorse saving the building. The immediate neighbors on Devereaux opposed the demolition, including Barbara Dilligard, who lives next door. We heard the opposite. I'm not sure where that came from, but we heard the opposite this morning. But the Preservation Society opposes demolition. It's has a lot of support in the community. So I'm totally opposed to the demolition. It's an historically notable house designed and built by an historically notable architect and contractor that contributes to the street with high quality design and good materials and has community support. It's hard to find a better candidate for preservation.
Thank you, Kevin. I don't want to miss someone here. Hillary King.
Hillary has submitted a letter.
I am not seeing the letter in here, but it.
Okay. I'll go ahead and read it after we hear from all the live people.
Got it. Okay, so Graham Miller.
Hello, my name is Graham Miller. I am a neighbor that lives up the street, 3 houses down. We actually renovated our home in the past few years. I believe some of the this information has been presented to the board. There's some before and after photos, but more importantly, there were some FEMA documents kind of showing both our home and 35 Devereaux relative to where they sit in the updated flood zones, which I know has been said several times, but all of these homes are in the X flood zone. We're on an extremely high bluff here that's natural and very rare. And I understand from some of the neighbors that have been here forever that we did not even have any flooding whatsoever during Hurricane Hugo. So those are kind of my thoughts as far as the flooding goes. And also relative to the flooding, the applicant showed a house on Ashley Avenue, I believe it's 874 or 974 as an example of homes being elevated in the neighborhood. But I echo what Kevin said as far as Wagner Terrace not being the same as exactly as what's over here. And then secondly, that home on Ashley is extremely rare that it sits on a hill there. And I would echo Kevin's thoughts as far as just the contextual relevance and the architectural value. You know, on a bigger scale, this collection of homes are so rare, especially in their contextual relationship to downtown Charleston. You know, there's just so few of these ranches, especially in a group together anywhere, but in downtown Charleston, makes it extremely rare. I do think what the applicant has shown at the Wagner Terrace Association as far as their plans are fitting as far as like a modern new style, but definitely not fitting with what exists. And would also just echo as far as the builder and the homeowner, their significance as far as early Black figures in Charleston. And then I would just also say that only recently have we as a nation woken up to the importance of preserving African American history in a new variety of ways. One of these is the homes and places of significance that were previously an afterthought regarding preservation. This is an excellent example of underappreciated Charleston Black history, as is much of Devereaux Avenue. Allowing its destruction would be removing a valuable piece of history that we'll never be able to get back. If it was simply deemed worthy of stating, its history will continue to be shared and passed down through generations. Generally, people don't view relatively young history as historically significant in the moment. It is only many years down the road that we are able to look back and realize what was important. It'd be a shame to look back 50 years from now and wonder what we were thinking, allowing removal of this significant piece of Black history. One other note, I think if we were to allow demo of this one, it gives way to every other developer that wants to demo on this street, which would really be a shame. And then ultimately the house is old enough to be protected. It was occupied by a notable Black figure. It was built by a notable Black figure. It was built using historically significant materials. It's a great example of houses of its era. There's no problem with the house remotely justifying its demo. The house is contextually significant and part of an extremely rare group of homes. And the group of homes is unlike any other in downtown Charleston. I appreciate y'all listening to me and voting to save the home. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Next is Dana McCarthy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right, thanks. Forgive me, I don't have anything prepared. I'm standing in my front yard looking at Mr. Gadsden's house. And I did, like Graham said, find it interesting that, you know, none of the homes actually that I'm looking at, I would say roughly 7 or 8 horizontal brick mid-century ranch homes were pictured in the in the presentation. It would be, I don't want to say everything that everyone else has said, but this street is very renowned and popular, and everyone slows down and drives by and oohs and ahs at these beautiful homes. I actually, about 3 or 4 years ago, went and knocked on every single door of the people's houses and interviewed them and just talked to them. And I learned from Miss Dilligard, who used to be on the zoning and planning, that this area was one of the first this is actually a second gentrification of this area. This actually was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. And then when she moved here about 40 years ago, this was the area where any African American that was able to afford a house of $100,000 or more moved to. And it was sort of the first prominent Black area in Charleston. And also not just African American history, but American history. The brick ranch actually started being built after World War II, when Americans started coming home and to a more prosperous America and a more casual way of living. There's actually a neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona, where they do not allow any alterations whatsoever of their brick ranches because of the historical significance. I know we're not Scottsdale, but obviously someone recognizes it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. I think that anything, even if it were the same height and dimensions, it would not be the same historically significant home. I spoke to the new owner, Miss Hastings, myself on the phone. Very lovely. She did mistakenly mention, I believe, that the reason they chose to buy this house was because it was the only place that they did not need to have it elevated. So, I mean, she herself knows that it does not need to be elevated. They're also known to have restored at least one, I'm sure probably more homes. And I find it interesting that they would not have had an engineer or a contractor look at it before purchasing, in order to find out if there's anything wrong or if they would need to change it if they were wanting to preserve it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Kim, I don't believe we have anyone else speaking from the public for 35 Devereaux. Can you confirm that?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the written comments. This is a letter from Hillary King for 35 Devereaux. 35 Devereaux contributes to the architectural history of Wagner Terrace and should not be approved for demolition. Collectively with the surrounding mid-century ranch houses, it illustrates the story of the development of the neighborhood. Though it is near the river, this circa 1970 pocket of housing was intentionally sited along a bluff. According to FEMA flood maps, the footprint of this house is in the shaded X zone, which indicates that it has a low flood risk. Allowing for the demolition of this house could easily kickstart a troubling neighborhood-wide trend, where many of our existing historic houses could potentially qualify for removal under the same criteria being applied to this request. As a resident of Wagner Terrace, it is important to me that we preserve the houses that create the sense of history and community that makes this area so desirable. Next, we have some letters of support. And I will read these. They're a series of emails. From Barbara Dilligard. Ms. Wilson, thank you for the presentation on the 35 Devereaux Avenue plans. I appreciate having that information and sharing my concerns. Based on the information you provided, I am not opposed to the demolition with the expectation that attention will be paid to demolition and construction activities that will not affect my property and others nearby. I have had a bad experience at a prior time and wish to avoid any problems. You graciously offered a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, which I am requesting at this time. Please send the same to my email address. Signed, Dr. Barbara D. Dilligard. Next is an email from Doug Warner. As a neighbor and a member of the neighborhood for over 20 years, I fully support your plan and want to welcome you to the neighborhood. I am happy to support you in any way I can. Next, an email from Lydia Applegate. We support this project and the demo of 35 Devereaux.
Lindsay, do you happen to have addresses for these individuals?
Let's see. Barbara Dillagard, 33 Devereaux Avenue. Thank you, Julia. Doug Warner, also in support. I do not see, so I see, looks like he has a business address at 423 King Street. Lydia Applegate's email in support of the project. I do not see an address for her. Corey Gladstein. We live in the neighborhood and firmly support this project. Thank you. Corey and Andy Gladstein. I do not see an address for that one. Eric Hofstrom. Dear Sarah Hamlin, go for it. It's clear you have the neighborhood's interest in mind. The design seems totally complimentary. I'm in support. Good luck. Signed, Eric. No address. Margaret Manuel. We support this project. Signed, Meg. And no address. Mary Perrin and Hamlin O'Kelly. The O'Kellys support this project. It's going to be awesome. No address. Email from Libba Osborne. Hi, Sarah Hamlin. We support this project. Libba and Chris Osborne, 133 Mary Ellen Drive. Elizabeth Pope. An email. We are in support of this project. I think the house looks fantastic. The size is perfect for the street. Thank you for taking that into account. No address. And that is it for the batch of emails. A March 12th, 2021 letter to the City of Charleston BAR. Dear members of the Board of Architectural Review, the Wagner Terrace Neighborhood Association, WTNA, has been presented with the requested changes as part of the application for a complete demolition at 35 Devereaux Avenue for homeowners Mr. and Mrs. Matthew Hastings. The membership voted to not support the demolition as the majority expressed that this home has significant architectural and historical value, and a renovation should be considered instead. Many residents of the surrounding homes share that the unique architecture of the houses on the street should not be altered this significantly. WTNA is not in support of the plans to demolish the house at 35 Devereaux and urges the board to reject their application. Sincerely, Amanda Gursky, WTNA President. Kim, I do see Kevin Everly's report in here and Graham Miller's letter, but given that they spoke, I do not think I need to read these into the record.
That's right.
That is all I have for the public comment. Kim, will you confirm that there is nothing else I'm missing?
That is all.
Lindsay, can I make one point of clarification? You weren't certain whether some of the people who had written in lived in the neighborhood, and
Right.
the correspondence from the Popes, the O'Kellys, the Applegates, and Manuels are all, I happen to know that they live in Wagner Terrace. I can just confirm that they live in that general area.
Okay. Thank you, Hunter.
Sure.
Okay. Kim, we'll move on to staff comments and recommendations.
Thank you. The building is over 50 years of age, but it's not a building that defines or contributes to the National Register District or the character of Wagner Terrace. Many of the neighborhood's buildings that contribute to the National Register District have irreplaceable materials and craftsmanship. Modern materials of this house, including T111 siding, a type of plywood, make up parts of the exterior. There are several striking examples of mid-century ranch houses in the neighborhood, but this particular house does not have the detailing, fenestration, wide overhangs, or other elements that define that architectural style. For these reasons, we are recommending final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Heather, did you want to respond to any of the public comment or clarify anything?
One point I would like to clarify, but I think you did in reading the email. Somebody who spoke said that Ms. Dillagard is not in support, but as she indicated in her email, she is. And so I just wanted to point that out. And I think Kim clarified what I would have gone back to, which is just the detailing on the home and the difference of this home again, that it is flatly on grade as opposed to the other examples of mid-century ranch homes that are in the neighborhood. But other than that, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. All right, I will open it up now to board discussion and a vote.
I guess I can start. This is Julia. And I think it's important to say that whichever way this goes, it does not set a precedent to follow with regard to any potential similar applications that might come later. Every case is considered individually. I am literally on the fence with this one. Originally, I had been aligned with staff and felt like this particular piece of architecture didn't quite meet the threshold for what I would be compelled to see preserved. But that said, the relevant history that's been conveyed to us is not inconsequential. So I'm anxious to hear what other board members have to say.
All right, well, I'll go. This is Eddie Bello. I'm also struggling with this one a little bit. I know the house very well. I've lived near here for over 20 something years as well. And I know the string of houses. I think there's a couple of things. And I knew Mr. DaCosta. I met with him on many occasions. And, I think it comes down to me to some of the things that staff said. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the comments that were made, especially Kevin's, and I know all the research he does, and it's very valuable. I think all the time. Sometimes I don't agree, but I always appreciate it. But back to me, it comes down to a couple of things. I mean, number one, does this contribute to the neighborhood? And I don't know that it does. I think architecturally, just on this street, there are other much better examples of this type of architecture. If you look at it, really look at it without sort of a nostalgic eye, it's not, in my opinion, a very good example of this type of architecture. And certainly the materials that were used are not good. Plywood siding, plywood soffits. I would argue that using historic brick on this style of house actually takes away from its value, because that's contrary to a sort of mid-century house. So I appreciate that they're going to keep the brick and use it, but I don't think that helps. And also, culturally, I think it would be a bit of a stretch to just say that any house that Mr. DaCosta worked on can't be touched or can't be torn down. I don't know that, I can't certainly speak for him, but I don't know that he would agree with that. He did, in just my short period of time of meeting with him, he did dozens of things around town. I mean, and some of them are really great and some were just things he just did. So to me, it comes down to whether or not this is a valuable and contributory building to the neighborhood and to that street. And it's hard for me to say that it is, especially when I can look, 2 doors down and see a much better example. So I'm leaning toward being in support of the demolition. So I'll see what everyone else has to say.
Lindsay Van Slambrook, I'm on the fence as well, but leaning towards denial simply because of the cultural significance. And I think it's even perhaps more important in the current climate that we really look at things like this, or structures like this. And I understand that the architect, that may not be his best work, but something just doesn't feel right to me from just a cultural significance standpoint to tear down a house where a prominent African American has lived for many, many years, and the architect was an African American architect. But I also do at the same time, see that this is not a great example of the architecture of that time, and perhaps the architect himself would say this was not my best work, and so I'm struggling here, but leaning towards denial, really for this cultural significance.
This is Bill. I was not able to attend the site meeting this morning. I apologize for that. Like Eddie said, I also had the privilege of knowing Mr. DaCosta. I learned he actually consulted on some projects that I worked on, learned a lot from him. And he was able to share some of his history of work in Charleston with a young intern at the time. And I did take a lot of what he said to heart, and appreciated his input. And he did express some of the history of even the work that he had done. And I remember one particular time he mentioned that there was a certain period of time, and it was pretty well known in the city, they were going around tearing down Victorians right and left for discounting the value of those buildings. And it was interesting in the sort of take of that part of history that I got from him. And Eddie, I kind of concur with maybe your assessment of what he probably in hindsight would say about this home and the way it was built. And obviously ranch homes have reached that point of the 50-year window. And there are ranch homes that are very good examples of maybe a better grade of construction. I've lived in a few of them. A little bit older ones, maybe in the 50s, when things were built a little bit different. It's pretty well known in architectural circles that the 70s is when, from a materiality standpoint, things got a little bit off track. A lot of the materials that were used were not of the best quality. And some of those materials are indicated as used on this home. So I agree with Eddie's assessment of potential, the value of this as a piece of, call it ranch style architecture, is probably in a little more of a diminished state because of its materiality. So I'd be inclined to agree with Eddie's assessment in that matter and staff's comments and recommendation.
Well, my name's Hunter Kennedy, and I think I initially approached this house assuming I was not aware of the cultural value of the property, who built it, who lived there when we made the site visit, and just judging it on its merits. I did not think it was an outstanding example of modernist architecture on the peninsula. I do think that there's some issues in terms of the quality of construction. However, I mean, this is a really tough case. I've owned a house built by Herbert Costa Sr. I restored it. I'm aware of his, I guess, standing on, historically on this peninsula, what that family meant to architecture here. And so I think it's a much more difficult decision. And so I'm considering maybe a deferral would be a better approach from my perspective in terms of making that decision on whether to approve a demolition. Because I would need more time to study this.
One factor that I'm weighing is the fact that it is in an X zone. If it were not in an X zone, I think the prospect of elevating it would be pretty far-fetched. But the fact that it's already deemed safe plays into my thinking a little bit.
Julia, I agree with you on that. If there was no ability to restore it or not to restore it in a way that would be safe, I think I think I would be more in favor of demolition, but because there's a possibility that it could be, wouldn't have to be raised, which from what I understand would not be an option to have it raised. That's playing into my thinking.
Hunter, if you were going to propose a deferral, what would you be wanting to see, or?
Well, I think the issue that we have to study further is just the feasibility of, or I think as a board, we need to discuss to what extent can a property be rehabilitated or modified, in this. I think that in this particular situation, there are some pretty compelling issues with the height of the slab, that, relative to the height of the deck, and the flooding issues that have been consistent since the house was built. But I don't know the best strategy for if you were going to renovate this house, you want to renovate it so that it's a long-term solution. So I think looking at the feasibility of how this ranch house could be adaptively, reused or renovated, like how much could be kept intact, or if this is something where, the smartest approach would be to salvage materials like this historic brick and, and just significantly modify it. So I think it's just up for discussion, or maybe, I think we need more time just because of the sensitive nature of who lived there, who built it, and the best path forward.
And I guess our purview is really a little bit limited in terms of what changes might be made that didn't rise to demolition.
Right.
So it's tough. Yeah, it's right at the line of being worthy of preservation, in my estimation. Anybody want to float a motion? My last little comment, it seems like most of the water intrusion is coming in at that patio, which could be adjusted. All right, I'll do it. I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion for final approval.
We have a motion on the floor for final approval by Julia. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Eddie, I'll put it to a vote. Hunter?
Yes. Yes.
Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Eddie?
It's his birthday.
In favor. Yay.
Chair votes nay, opposed. The 4 in favor, the motion passes. On to agenda item number 2, 116 Ashley Avenue. Kim? You're on mute.
116 Ashley Avenue is requesting final approval for demolition. The building's not rated in the Charleston Village, and it was built in 1967 in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial. You can see the properties right there, south of Calhoun and Bennett Street, just north of Bull. And here's some existing photographs. And looking north and south. And another south. And if we have Carol Howell. Carol, you have the floor whenever you're ready. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
and David.
I'm here. Good afternoon. I wanted to say thank you first. This is a very thoughtful process, and I have to say, for the record, I'm not an architect. I'm not a historian, but I'm a person who loves the historic charm of the city, and would like to plant roots there. So wanted to just give you just a little bit of an introduction. That's my family. Ever since our first trip to Charleston, we've just loved it. So I'd like to set the context for why we believe the building should be demolished, and to walk you through some of the other houses in the neighborhood. Relative to this structure, our belief is that this structure does not represent the architectural style and charm of the surrounding houses, and they've mostly been renovated already and have been beautifully done. And I know this is not the meeting to get approval for what we would want to build, but we have fallen in love with a house that looks historic, but was architected and built recently at 151 Queen Street, and that's the image that you see there. So you can jump to the next slide. So the property is 116 Ashley, and you can see it's outlined in the blue square there. It is a 2-story structure that is a wood structure on a concrete slab. It is in the flood zone, which is the AE 11 foot, but the structure is actually, on ground level. It has a surrounding asphalt driveway and parking lot. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the buildings around it, except for the one right next door, are all residential homes that have been beautifully renovated. Right next door is another dentist office, and this has been zoned residential with a variance to have this commercial structure on it. And then the adjacent street to this one is Bennett Street. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is the front elevation in the building. You can see that it's quite dilapidated. It was a dentist office for many years, but it has not been operated in 3 years. It was built in 1967. And as I go through some of the other photos, you'll see that the drywall has been removed in the base of each of the rooms because of previous flooding. It's our perspective that this architecture does not render the character and charm defined by the traditional architecture of a Charleston residence and the houses that are around this structure. You can go to the next slide. So this gives you kind of an aerial view so that you can see this where 116 Ashley is. It's that flat roof building right there. And you can see, the house right next door on Bennett with that beautiful, I don't know what the architecture name for it, but it's the, you know, the kind of the beautiful top there. That one was just completely renovated and recently sold. And you can also see that it's close to Cannon Park. So it's in a nice location, and I think she's got the marker over where it is on that aerial view. You can jump to the next slide. So we'll walk down the street as if you know, we were taking a stroll. So this is that beautiful house at 11 Bennett that was recently renovated. You can see by the arrow, it is right next door. It has a carriage house that was recently built in a garden, and from their property, that's what they see, that left side elevation view. You can go to the next slide, please. Walking down the street, this is 117 Ashley, which also has been beautifully renovated. And from their front yard, they see the front, and then they see this right elevation view there. You can jump to the next slide. Continuing down the street, this is the next house that again has been beautifully renovated. And from their front yard, they see that front elevation in the side. You can go to the next slide, please. Again, walking down the street further, this is 113 Ashley, beautifully renovated. Now they don't see this back view, but I just wanted to continue kind of walking you down the street so you can see what's happened in the neighborhood. And you can see there on the right-hand side, that is what the building looks like from the rear. And we did take a walk, although I didn't include the pictures, around the street of the houses that would be on the backside of 116 Ashley. And it's the same story. They're all really beautifully renovated residential homes. Can you jump to the next slide? So these are interior photos, and we have confirmed through conversations with an architect that the current structure doesn't allow us to move forward with more of a residential design home. You can see that the drywall has been removed due to flooding. I would like to point out, however, that does appear to be an original Apple Macintosh with a floppy drive, so we might actually keep that.
It's funny.
That might be good for the library. You can continue to the next page. This was the waiting room for this dentist office, and again, you can see it's just on the concrete slab, and the drywall was removed due to the flooding. And I think that might be the last slide, Kim, or is there one more? Okay, this is just all the details that honestly it's too difficult to read, so I don't know that you need to go through all of those. But you know, just in conclusion, we love the city. We would love to build something that is really in line with historic architecture and charm. We want something that looks historic, that's new, in place of this property, and we humbly ask for your permission to demolish this current structure. We do plan on using a restoration company to do the demolition if approved, so that none of the materials end up in a landfill. So thank you for your time and consideration, and I'll turn it back over to the chair for public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Do we have any questions from board members for Ms. Howell before we continue? All right. Move on to public comment. Kim, it looks like we have no one speaking. We just have one letter from Timothy Liptak. And Timothy Liptak was at 114.5 Ashley. If demolition occurs, how will the owners ensure my property next door is protected as well as my patients during business hours? Since the buildings in this area are in close proximity, how will you mitigate construction, traffic, and debris? And Kim, do we have anything else that I am missing?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Kim, if you'll give city staff comments and a recommendation.
Sure. This building does not contribute or characterize the neighborhood in Charleston Village, nor is it constructed with unique or irreplaceable materials. It is in the old historic district, which will require board review for demolition. So we are recommending final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Ms. Howell, did you want to respond to any of the public comments?
Sure. Yeah, no, that and that's a great point. We are in no hurry whatsoever, and we're working with a company to do the demolition that seeks to preserve and reuse as much of the materials as possible. I can certainly work with them to see if they could do that off hours. We could also put up some kind of a really nice kind of privacy fence if that would be helpful, but we would certainly work with the dentist's office to make sure that it's not too disruptive. I did a little research. He is one of the best rated dentists in town, so definitely want to keep him happy.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. All right, let's move into board discussion and a vote.
I think staff is right on. I mean, it's clear that whoever designed this had a little bit of fun, and if they had had a lot more money, I might feel differently, but I'm totally with staff.
I agree. It's in very poor shape too because the materials are so bad. So I move for approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for approval. Julia, was that you that second? All right, I will put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay, in favor.
Hunter? Hunter, you're on mute.
Yay, in favor.
Thank you. Eddie?
Yay, but you must salvage the Mac 2 computer as part of the deal. That cannot be demolished.
That is a motion on the floor. I'm checking. Yay in favor. Julia?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, agenda items number 3 and 4, both 60 Meeting Street, have been deferred by staff. Agenda item number 5, 4 Lowndes Street, has been withdrawn by staff. So we are on to agenda item number 6, 62 Queen Street. Kim, you'll give your intro.
I will. Thank you. "62 Queen Street is requesting final approval for a new mural on the east elevation. The building is not rated in the French Quarter. This rear addition was built in 2019 and in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial to familiarize yourself with the location on Queen, between Meeting and Church on the north side. Some photos of the existing site. And here's the east elevation and proposal location. Looking west on Queen and east. And this image was lifted from their website. It's just a couple of historic pictures. We have Mr. Boatwright presenting. Mr. Boatwright, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Mr. Boatwright, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Mr. Boatwright.
video. I'm trying to.
I
Okay.
Hear and see you.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. It's good to see some old new faces here. Well, this is, Queen Street, which is quite eclectic street, really. Some commercial stuff that going on, and there's residential, and just a mix of things going on in that particular area, including a mural I did a block away, which was took a page from the Pierre Renoir painting, a famous painting, and I sort of adapted that. Now, some of you may or may not be familiar with that mural, but I think we were doing something similar here. But this was really to honor Diana Brown, who was matriarch at that property for many years. And in fact, the family owned that property until just a few years ago, until the current homeowners took possession. These homeowners, they have a civic impulse. They just, there's something in them that wants to engage the community, the neighborhood in some way. And this is the medium they chose. It's pretty straightforward in the sense. I mean, it started out with just one figure on the side of that wall, but then sort of similar to the project down the street, we thought to invoke a contemporary artist, contemporary with Diana Brown, which is Rene Magritte, a surrealist in France, and they were curiously, overlapping lifetimes. And so it really was to give a sort of spatial quality to the whole wall. And I think that's about it. I mean, with the mural presentations, it's very different from an architectural one. It's just what you see is what you get. So I'll be glad to take any questions. And
Thank you, Mr. Boatwright. Do we have any questions from board members at this time?
I've got a question. Hey, David. So what I'm seeing here are just images that you superimposed on. Are you going to paint it like this, or is it going to be a photo? Can you describe exactly what we're going to end up seeing? Is it going to look like this, or is it going to look more like what I often see that you've done?
Well, this is a little different from it. Yeah, but the idea was just, just a solitary figure. I mean, we tried a lot of different things along the way, and I just thought, it would be nice to honor her, invoke her presence, and there could even be a plaque or something, perhaps on Queen Street at the entrance. I don't know about that, but that's been bandied about. But no, this is what you see is what I'm proposing.
Okay, thanks.
Any other board questions?
No, sorry. Psych, no.
This is Bill. So this really doesn't have any commercial purpose at all. It's just a memoriam or an honorary mural.
That's correct. I mean, I think they may have some Airbnb or some rental situation in part of the complex here, the compound. But yeah, it's not really motivated so much by any commercial impulse. And this was the only picture I was able to find of her. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with her. She was an antique dealer. There was originally a livery stable at the site, and her family did that for a long time. And then she sort of, as horse and carriage went out. She started selling antiques for primarily wealthy residents from South abroad, and she became kind of renowned nationally. And had, I think somewhere I read, she sold some pieces to the Metropolitan. She was just considered, a knowledgeable antique dealer, which is quite rare. And she was mentioned in the WPA too as a notable resident.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. We have a couple individuals speaking. Stephanie Wilson Gentile.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you for letting me speak. First of all, I'd like to thank Dave. I live at 54 Queen Street, Stephanie Wilson Gentile, and I'm the president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. And I want to thank Mr. Boatwright for allowing the board of the French Quarter to take a look at his proposal ahead of time, which we did last month. And as I indicated to Mr. Boatwright, the board has decided not to take a position, neither pro nor con. But we do appreciate that he is trying to honor Ms. Brown. Since he showed us his proposal, as a private citizen, I just have two comments, or two questions actually. Have any of the descendants of Ms. Brown been contacted, if they're still in the area, to ask for their input and approval? Because I think this might be a sensitive issue. If it were my great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother, I might like to have some input before I see her splashed across a wall such as this. The second thing is, I understand Mr. Boatwright's inspiration for this design. I'm just concerned that viewers might not understand why this woman's image is floating across this wall in this manner. But again, I want to thank Mr. Boatwright for trying to honor Ms. Brown, because I think she's worthy of the honor. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson Gentile. And Mr. Boatwright, I'll let you respond to her questions after we get through public comment.
The homeowners did approach a descendant of Miss Brown, and she responded positively, but I have not seen any documentation of that or anything. But I think she was going to share it with some other relatives. But I think the person they knew felt good about it. So, but I agree, I'm glad they did that too.
Thank you, Mr. Boatwright. We also have Erin Minnigan.
Thank you, Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. First, we'd like to thank the applicant for reaching out and meeting with us to walk us through the proposal. Generally, the Preservation Society is not opposed to murals as a reversible measure. However, we would encourage restudy of this particular request to reflect a design more compatible with the sensitive historic context. While we appreciate the reference to the building's history and think that's a good direction to go in, we are concerned the art inspiration does not translate well to this particular mural design and results in an image that is a bit jarring. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And I believe that is all we have for public comment. I don't see any written letters in here. Kim, if you will give city staff comments and recommendations.
Thank you. While the building's in a historic neighborhood, the building itself is not historic, and a mural would be appropriate for this location. Not saying a historic building is not appropriate, but the mural is large and prominently repetitive, which doesn't further the distinctiveness or interest. One of these figures, as opposed to multiple that are proposed, could be interesting and more subtle. For these reasons, we're recommending denial, staff conditions.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Boatwright, did you want to respond to any of the public comment or the staff comments and recommendations?
No, I understand them.
All right, let's move on to board discussion and a vote.
All right, well, I'll start. And I think I always have a lot of trouble critiquing, a mural or, and I respect a lot of what Mr. Boatwright does. So I've got a couple of thoughts. One, I don't know that I have any issue with the mural on this wall or even this approach, and I recognize the reference right away. I think one of the things that I'm struggling with is I actually like that wall. I like the simplicity of that design. It's a really well done composition to me. It's just a plain blank wall to a lot of people, but the architect spent some time sort of thinking about it, and I kind of like it. And I think that what this is presenting is, to me, it is a bit jarring. And so one of the questions an idea I was gonna propose was, could it be something similar, but not quite so representational or so, it's like I want to have it faded out somewhat, so it's not as strong, and maybe it's a little faded. I don't know, again, I defer to the artist on it, but to me, it seems like a little much for that wall. And I kind of don't want it, personally, I don't like it taken away from the simplicity of that wall so much. So I would be okay with a deferral for restudies of the approach. Again, I'm not opposed to a mural. I just wonder if there's another way of even if it's the same image, but just handled differently. That's why I was asking about how it's actually going to be represented on the wall. I don't know if that made any sense, but I guess I'll be quiet and listen to the rest of the board.
All right, I'll go. I also recognize the reference, and I appreciate Magritte's work. But I'm just having trouble with why that would be meshed with this particular individual. Seems kind of random. And I enjoyed, David, when you were talking about some of the anecdotes from the history of the property and this Ms. Brown in particular. And it seems to me like you could maybe find something related to her and use that, to enhance the composition. I know you're more talented than almost anybody at doing that sort of thing, even if you don't have a literal photograph to copy, rather than just stamping out her likeness, which just it's not quite working for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Lindsay Van Slambrook. I am not opposed to a mural in this location. I think it's a great location for it, actually. And I think I concur with Eddie's comments. I think with the Preservation Society that it's just a little jarring to me. And so I would support a motion for deferral with restudy. Yeah.
This is Bill. I'm in agreement with some of the comments that have been made. I do think it's a bit jarring, and I guess the thing that I'm still trying to grasp is if it does not have a commercial function, the sort of civic presence of murals, and historically, I guess, I always make reference to some form of a commercial venture of some kind. Not that I don't enjoy and love public art. And we do have a blank wall here as potentially a palette. I'm just trying to understand that sort of bridge of use, if you will. There's probably a lot of blank walls on the peninsula and down the residential area. If somebody might decide they want a mural down there, I'm just trying to understand if we're sort of making a bridge into a new territory here. It does border a parking lot. I do see that, and I'm familiar with I believe actually this board approved this blank wall at least I was on the board when the blank wall was approved. I do remember the stable doors that were there and the entrance there and everything. And I believe at the time we had some discussion about the blank wall and how that might be addressed. wouldn't say that I am unreceptive to the presence of some form of art on the wall. I just think maybe it need to be addressed in a slightly different way, contextually, because most people walking down the street, and of course your average tourist is not going to understand it at all. But I'm sure a lot of people maybe wouldn't understand the context as well. So I think potentially, let's say leave the door open to a mural solution here, but maybe a different type of solution.
Yeah, Hunter Kennedy. I'd be supportive of a mural on this wall, but I do think it merits further study. I agree with many of the comments that have already been made by the board. And so I think, you know, deferral with restudy of the design of the mural would be appropriate.
Sounds like a motion.
Or was that a motion that you made?
I was not making a motion. I was making a comment, but.
Well, I'll make a motion. Deferral with restudy, taking into account the board comments. I think something a little more subtle, at least in my mind, would be more appropriate. So I would move for deferral.
I'll second it.
So I have a motion on the floor for deferral with restudy with a board comment to restudy and focus on subtlety. Eddie, would that be a proper?
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I have a second from Hunter. So I will put that motion to a vote, assuming Kim, you got that, the motion?
I did, thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Eddie?
Yay in favor.
Hunter?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Boatright.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, is it administrative?
Well, just the comment from staff about maybe one image, one figure, which I certainly would consider that, but I guess it's not something I can just take to staff at this point. But I think that's a worthy suggestion. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boatright. Moving on to agenda item number 7, 122 Trad Street. Kim, give an intro.
Thank you, Lindsay. 122 Trad Street's requesting garden renovations, including new hardscape pool and landscape lighting. The building's a category 2 in the Charlestown neighborhood, was built in 1835 and in the old and historic district. Just for some context, it's right here in the middle of your screen on Trad on the north side. And this is looking east on Trad Street. And here's some images of the house. Hard to get a good image of this 3-story house on the skinny street, but here it is there with the flag. And looking east. And that's all I have. We have Madison Rice here presenting. Madison, if you are ready, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thanks, Kim. So this is the home of Grant and Sarah Dollins. They have 2 young kids and have asked us to renovate their garden. That would include a new pool and hardscapes. So this is the existing conditions we're looking at here. It's important to note that our firm, Werdemer & Klein, designed this existing garden way back in 2014. So it's not anything that's been around too long. And looking at the existing garden and speaking to the clients, we found that the circular patio space at the very rear of the garden was not very useful for families' needs and was really an ideal location for a new pool. We were able to maintain the dining terrace and lawn space, which is great for the kids, as you can see here, and their pets as well. There are currently 2 fountains back in the existing conditions plan. I can point those out. Advance one forward, please. Okay. 1 fountain at the rear that is going to remain, but it's going to be relocated to the bottom of your screen in the middle, where that right there. Yeah. So we're going to relocate that to where that existing fountain is, just to make room for the pool deck. In order to allow for construction equipment access, we are going to have to remove a brick column and brick coping with a wrought iron fence. Just temporarily remove it and then build it once construction of the garden is complete. And then as far as landscape lighting, we are proposing all, path lights and 1 fountain light. I believe that's all I have. So if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Do we have any questions from board members at this time? All right.
I do have one question, Lindsay. Just confirming the wrought iron and wall. I believe Mr. Rice said that was part of the installation in 2014. That was part of the garden that they designed.
Yes, sir. That's
original.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board questions? All right, we'll move on to public comment. We have April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has an exterior easement at 122 Trad Street. HCF has reviewed and approved of the proposed alterations to its easement property, and we respectfully recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, April. That's all we have for public comment. Kim, if you would give staff comments and recommendations.
Thank you. Since this is a Category 2 building, all modifications must be heard by the board. Otherwise, staff would have given a swift approval. We do suggest a dialogue to modify a policy statement to give authority to staff to approve minor adjustments to Category 1 and 2 buildings. Conversation for perhaps another time. This proposal is appropriate and modest and either reconstructing what was previously existing or only moderately visible. So staff is recommending final approval.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Rice, did you have any response or need any clarification? Mr. Rice?
No, I understand. Thank you.
We'll move on to board discussion and a vote.
I move for final approval.
Yeah, and Kim, I would say that your suggestion is a great one, and you should have that power.
I confirm. Who made the motion for final approval?
I did.
Eddie, thank you.
Bill, I'll second.
Bill, I'll put it to a vote. Motion for final approval. Hunter?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Eddie?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Rice. Moving on to agenda item number 8, 164 King Street. Kim?
Thank you. 164 King Street is requesting final approval to replace concrete steps and mid-landing with matched marble slab treads, bluestone landing and walkways, and new handrails to match existing. The building's a category 3, the Charlestown neighborhood, built in 1914 in the Old and Historic District. And just some context for familiarity. This is on the east side of King between Queen and Horlbeck Alley. And here's a great image, although those trees are no longer there. Looking north on King and looking south, and some old images. Drawing. And this was in the most recent trip that the board made, the project made in 2018 for window replacement. And I figured this drawing might be helpful to show where the bluestone treads are going. And this one as well. And I'm going to turn it over to James and Dominique Volpe.
Mr. Volpe, you're on mute. You are still on mute.
All right, here I am. John Smart was actually going to be talking. I was just following the meeting. I don't know if he's out there somewhere. John, you there?
Oh, I see him. There we go. Mr. Smart, you're on mute.
Mr. Smart, you're still on mute.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. John Smart with Smart Renovations. I'm the general contractor making a presentation for the Charleston Library Society. The goal is to replace a heavily damaged, failing concrete entryway to the actual building, the marble entry. In doing so, I've been tasked to help the Library Society enhance this and maybe make it more blending with the marble entry. And in doing so, we're going to replace the concrete steps with matching marble slabs from Georgia Marble that we have already sourced, and also replacing the mid landing, which is currently just standard concrete with a bluestone in the pattern to match the actual sidewalk. We're hoping to add 2 more handrails for safety in the middle to match within a line with the handrails. I believe they were installed in 2017-18 that are directly above it, and repair 1 damaged rail that was done during the construction and the replacement of the roof. I'm available for any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Do we have any questions from my fellow board members at this time?
I have one. So when you go back with the marble and all, that makes perfect sense. At either side of the stairs, the lower stairs, it looks like there was, at some point they added handrails with pickets. Are those going back, or are you going to go back with just a similar rail as is in the center, basically just a straight rod?
Thank you for your question. We're actually going to leave those. Those are existing, so we're repairing 1. I think they blend with the upper rails that are directly above it, and the 2 we're adding in the middle will match the newer rails in the dead center there on the thirds.
Okay. Thanks.
Very welcome.
Any other board questions at this time? All right. We'll move on to public comment. We have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for final approval to replace the concrete steps in mid-landing with matched marble slab treads, bluestone landing and walkways, and new rails to match existing. We believe the request is carefully considered and will improve the appearance of the property. We respectfully recommend approval of this request. Thank you.
Thank you, April. And that is all we have for public comment. Kim, if you would give staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thank you. Although we find it to be a positive change, staff feel that the civic and prominent building required a board review, so that's why it's here. But staff's recommending final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Smart, did you have anything to respond to between public and staff comments?
No thanks.
Okay. I'll open it up for a board discussion and a vote.
This is Julia. I'm a proud member of this fine institution, but I'm not at all conflicted in making a motion for final approval.
Julia, I have a motion on the floor for final approval. Do I have a second?
I have one comment, and it has to do with why I brought up those railings at the end, at the bottom. Those aren't historic. If you look at the old photographs, those were never there. And they were just added, and you don't need pickets, per code or anything there. So if the intent is just to have something so people have a way to, a handrail to get up the stairs, I would ask that they just match the simple railing design that's in the center of the stairs and just put those on either side instead of adding those non-historic. I wouldn't want to match something that's not historic and not really needed. I think it takes away from the elegance of the stairs. Does that make, am I clear?
I didn't think they were going to match the picket rails. I thought they were going to match the ones in the middle. I mean, it's true that the picket ones are not.
Those aren't great. So I'd rather not see those again. And I thought that's what I asked about. If those are going back, I'd rather, or he's going to add more to match it. I don't support that. Maybe the applicant can clarify because it's not on the drawings. I don't see it anywhere.
It says in the application, new rails to match existing. I assumed that was without pickets because that would be a waste of money.
I agree. So maybe we can just add that to your motion that it would match the center rail design.
Sure. Final approval with a condition to match the existing rails on the upper run. No pickets.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion for final approval on the floor with a board condition that they match the upper rail. Julia?
Yes. No pickets.
No pickets. Do you have a second?
I'll second it. Eddie?
Thank you, Eddie. I'll put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Hunter?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Eddie?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Mr. Smart. Moving on to agenda item number 958 Hanover Street. Kim?
Thank you. All right. 58 Hanover Street is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a single-family dwelling. Yeah, it's in the east side and Old City District. There's an aerial for a little familiarity. East side of the street, north of Columbus. And here's a nice image showing the surrounding houses. And then this is from Aiken Street. In this image, there isn't a house there. May have changed since then, but so the back is completely visible. But here's the existing site. And this is looking north and looking south. And with that, I will turn it over to Johnny Tucker. You have the floor, Mr. Tucker.
Kim?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Johnny Tucker, architect. I'll just try to go through this as quickly as I can. So this is a existing vacant lot. And as you can see from the image on the left, that tax map, this lot is very similar to several of the adjacent properties. There is a church at the north end of the block. You'll see that in some of the photos you've seen already. So if you go to the next image, please, Kim. And these are similar to the photos that Kim provided. The top is looking east and the vacant lot subject properties in the middle there. And then on the bottom of the sheet is the subject property looking west from the back of the property. Next image, please. So this is a streetscape, again, looking east, showing that there's a sort of like some sister houses to the south that are nice, traditional Charleston single houses. And then there's some smaller houses to the north. You see the one that's currently being renovated directly to the north. And then this is showing that we're trying to fit within the height, scale, and mass of the adjacent properties. And the next image, please. And this is the streetscape on the west side of the street. You'll see, again, nice row of Charleston single houses, some later not as successful houses to the south there. That it's hard to see, but that little red dotted line shows the ghost sort of profile of the proposed house at 58 Hanover. And next image, please. Just the survey. That's next, please. Okay, and this is, you've seen this, but this sort of shows as like a figure ground. So you see that the proposed footprint is very much in keeping with the existing surrounding properties. So the house will be actually almost in line with all the other adjacent properties. Next, please. And it's a simple little single family house, 2 stories. We're actually, you'll see in the elevations, we're elevated because of flood, but not a full story, less than 6 feet. But it's a little over 1,700 square feet, 3-bedroom, 3-bath house, a small roof terrace at the back, you'll see in the elevations. Next floor plan is the second floor, which shows the similar footprint, of course, and there's that little roof terrace in the back, which is, I don't think will be visible from the street, and I've sort of concealed it. You'll see in the elevations. The next plan is the roof plan. It's sort of self-explanatory. Next slide shows all 4 elevations. And if you could go to the next one, the next 4 slides will just be enlarged. I'll just walk through those sort of quickly. So this is the West Street elevation, and you can see the AE, the flood maps have changed recently. Obviously downtown that's happened, but we end up in AE flood zone. So design flood elevations 2 feet above that, right at 12 feet. Fortunately, it's low here. It's around 6.2 to 6.5 feet above sea level. So we're under 6 feet for the base, the crawl space. Fortunately, some adjacent houses have the same condition. So we think you'll see in the streetscape at the end, think it sort of successfully mimics those. South side, okay, south driveway elevation, you'll see there's a little bay window, and I hate, if you don't mind going back one, Kim, thank you. Yeah, so that little, I did show some shadowing on this, just on this front elevation, because that's sort of where all the you need to understand where the three-dimensional quality of that bay sticking out, 18 inches, and there's a screened element in the sort of, I will call it a piazza, although it's pretty skinny because it's a skinny lot, but sort of trying to create somewhat of a traditional feel of a side piazza, but it's not. And now the south elevation, please. Next slide. So there is the lattice element on the left side that's creating that shadow at that front elevation. So then the rest of the side elevation is sort of treated almost like a piazza infill. So the siding changes to this vertical board and batten. Main portion of the house is just traditional. Well, it's traditional hard, but it's lap siding. And the next slide. And so this is the rear elevation. That parapet wall sort of delineates, that's that roof terrace. And on the next elevation, you'll see part of half of that roof terrace sort of in antis or in carved out of the massing of the house. And I thought that was sort of a nice way to sort of help disguise that there is a roof terrace, so that the major form of the house, the what's under the main roof line, sort of matches the depth of the surrounding houses. And there's that little, what looks like a addition on the back, which has the parapet that doesn't seem overly sized. And then the next slide, I'm wrapping up, shows the proposed materials. So obviously we have a lime wash CMU foundation. The main body of the house is, as I mentioned, just the 5/8 cementitious fiber cement siding, sort of traditional corner boards. The two elements that are unusual, I think, I mean, obviously the form is a little unusual with the shed roof, but the front bay window and then that element, I'll point it out on the last slide, the sort of the wedge under the shed roof is the, has the flush tongue and groove, what am I trying to say? Nickel gap. So with mitered corners. So it's a little different handling of the material there. And then of course that side element I pointed out, the piazza infill, not a piazza, but as if it was a piazza infill, is the board and batten. And then just the lattice at the front piazza, just horizontal boards painted. Not a lot of railing. As I mentioned, there's a parapet at the back terrace, roof terrace, but there is a side. I didn't point that out, but you can see it in the plans or the elevations. There is a side rear stairway, and I was proposing there just, yeah, on next, the south, next slide back, right there, yeah, lower right, sort of a back stairway to access into the kitchen, which is, that's where that proposed metal railing, horizontal railing, not super visible, but visible down the driveway. But it is a new house. And then the last material, if you don't mind shooting back towards the end there, Kim. Oh, yeah, well, last and least, it is a asphalt single roof, hopefully not super visible. It is a new house. And next slide, and I'm wrapping it up. So that is sort of just enlarged that west streetscape, showing what I think is sort of, and again, I'm here for conceptual height scale mass. I think it's sort of successful that the raised crawl space foundation sort of, fortunately, we sort of match with the houses to the south. House to the north is a little shorter. I mean, this is a diagram, but I sort of feel like the unusual roof line, sort of works. We don't go above the ridge lines to the historic houses, and sort of trying to, I don't know if we're really deferring to the house to the north, but just sort of trying to lower the massing towards house to the north. Obviously, it's sitting about 2 to 3 feet into the flood level, so it's a little, it's always going to be the new construction is always going to be a little bit taller, but I feel like this is pretty successful as far as height, scale, and mass. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Do we have any questions from board members at this time?
I just had a quick question about the site plan. Johnny, the cars, I think, are shown like back in the backyard. Is there some reason?
Yeah, the owners who are not here tonight, they just don't like cars in the side driveway, God bless them. So they want to be behind gates, which I'm not showing the design for the gates at the end of the driveway there. But they don't like having cars in the side. And actually, I think it's sort of good because I should have mentioned this. The lot's only 30 feet wide. So we are squeezed in there with setbacks. So 3 foot north setback, obviously 7 foot south, but to have a driveway, we need 9 feet, obviously. But with 9 feet, everyone knows you're hitting car doors with the house, and the house to the south, 56 Hanover, it's right on the property line. So it's sort of nicer if the cars are in the back, because at least the driver can get out. But that's why they're parked back there.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask one more question. So on the front elevation, at that smaller mass, I won't call it a piazza, what we're seeing are just shadow lines, and that's just wide open with one horizontal kind of tie-in in the midpoint. Yeah.
So that's, this is probably other than the shed roof, it's definitely unusual. But since it is a 4 foot wide, it's not a porch, it's an entry element, but it is it's covered because that side roof line extends the full width of that side element. I guess the idea was to sort of create this a little bit of an unusual space that's covered, but completely, well, not completely, but because of the lattice in a lot of shade, most of the, that's south, that's at the south wall. So that is what you're seeing. It is a double height space.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? All right, we'll move on to public comment. I think we have Earlene White.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. White.
I sent in a letter as well because I wasn't sure whether or not I could be here. But my only concerns regarding this structure is the design of the roof. With the exception of a housing unit that was built in the 70s, all houses on Hanover Street between Columbus and Line Streets have the A-shaped designed roof. In addition, the majority have tin roofs. The lot at 58 Hanover Street is next to my house and in close approximation to 3 more 2-story houses that complement one another and maintains the A roof style. I sent some photos in by email, but he had already showed you, I believe, the south side pictures, and you would see how those houses are designed with that A-shaped roof. The house that was previously on the lot at 58 Hanover was also built with that A design to complement the area. And I would like the owner to consider building the house with the A angled roof design so that it conforms to the traditional style and preserve a sense of history that we are accustomed to and proud of. And incidentally, those adjacent houses on that side of the street where their house will be built were all built in the 1850s. So they all really complement one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. And for the benefit of the board, Ms. White is right next door at 56 Hanover Street. All right. And we have another letter from Gail L. Lincoln. I'm concerned about the design of the roof of the structure that is being proposed to be built at 58 Hanover Street, which is next to my home at 56 Hanover Street. All the houses on the same side of the street the structure may be built have an A-shaped design roof, of which has always given a cohesive, attractive old character to the street, which has been admired for years. I would hate to see that character be taken away. I would like the owners to consider proposing a house with an A-shaped design roof, which contribute to the character of the street as they join us as neighbors. Thank you, Gail L. Lincoln, also at 56 Hanover Street. And that is all we have for public comment. Move on to Kim, if you'll give city comments and recommendations.
Thank you. Typically, a shed roof includes additional clear story windows to allow the entry of light. If it sheds to the south instead of the north, it has the potential for solar collectors, but that might be the only positive of this roof line, which should be restudied. The mass that simulates an enclosed piazza is inappropriate and should be restudied. The fenestration is orderly except for the north elevation, align windows with more consistency. The height scale and mass is appropriate, but general architectural direction needs refinement. So we are recommending deferral for our general architectural direction and staff comments noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Tucker, did you want to respond to any of the public comment or staff comments?
I will say the owners did present the project to the East Side Community Development Corporation, I think is the name of the neighborhood association. And I believe I was not able to attend that meeting. I believe the question of the of Mrs. White next door was brought up at the meeting, and I guess I feel like I understand obviously that is the traditional roof line, and I guess if you could well you've seen it. I guess I just felt that with the streetscape, you know, and you know this, you've seen several projects where, you know, emulate the historic roof line or not. I just felt that with the, this was maybe just a unique way to make that transition from the taller buildings to the south to the buildings to the north that weren't as tall. So I thought that was sort of a way to address that in a different way. I mean, obviously, you know, it's not an historic building, you know, but I think this was the direction that the owners were interested in. Obviously, I designed it, and I just wanted to present it to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. I'll now open it up for discussion by the board and a vote.
I can start if no one else wants to. I have no issue with the, you know, general aesthetic that is more contemporary. I don't really have a problem with the single pitch roof, although I think the architect could probably achieve similar goals even with a regular pitched roof, gabled roof. I'm a little conflicted about the wide open, extremely vertical nature of the front of the entry area. But I don't have any major problem with there being a larger mass and a smaller mass. I don't think it's necessarily somehow in violation of something critical to Charleston. I think it's, I think it serves a lot of purposes. And I do appreciate how the architect has integrated that rear roof deck into the geometry so that it's not overly noticeable or distracting. I think that's about all I've got.
Well, I'll add a couple things. I think I agree with what you said, Julia. I'm not opposed to the shed roof either. I do think part of the issue is like staff brought up, you've got, I mean, the pitch has to be what it is. I'm guessing it's as low as you can go because you're using shingles, but you end up with just a blank space at the high portion. And, that's just, it's not as strong as I guess it could be. So I don't know what you do with that, but that I can see that being an issue, and I kind of agree with staff on it. But the only way to solve that would be to lower the pitch or to lower the bearing height on the low side where so it comes down and it's a little more integrated with the building. I mean, I don't know. I know Mr. Tucker could figure it out, but I can see where, to me, that's a bit of an issue. I don't have a problem with the narrow entry. It's not a piazza. So I think all that's fine. I like the lattice. I do think, and this is more of a preliminary comment, but I think, just having a single piece of wood over and it's just 6x6 posts, I think that could use a little more development so that because it's the front of the house. And I think it could be a little bit just better detailed, as you get into it. The only other comment I had is can you show the south elevation, the next slide? I think next one. Yeah, I don't think personally you need to have 3 different types of siding on this little house. I think it would be stronger if instead of board and batten, you just went with that 4-inch V groove in this bay area. Then it would sort of tie in. And if you did it thoughtfully, that same size could extend to your lattice. So it's sort of all ties in somehow. To me, one more material on such a little house, I think it takes away. I mean, I think it ought to be nice and simple. So I would just suggest that. I mean, you don't have to agree. I just think it would be better. But I kind of agree that right now the roof, again, I'm not opposed to it, but it doesn't seem to be working as well as it could with the overall proportions. So I would think that might want to be restudied.
Well, I guess Hunter Kennedy, I guess I'll speak. I like what Mr. Tucker's done. It's a challenging lot. It's a tight envelope. He's been able to address a lot of the design challenges. I do agree that maybe the biggest issue that still has to be resolved is that roof. I think the house would be more even more successful if he did decide to go with a gable or a hipped roof as opposed to this shed. I understand the thought process behind it and trying to scale it down to the smaller house to the north, but it's the way it's currently constructed with that, you've got that blank wall above with the 4-inch V groove. I just think that you can improve this design even more if you maybe change the direction from a shed to a gable. You might consider that. And the one thing that we didn't address, and this is a small detail, and I'm sure Mr. Tucker's considered this, but I would just, there's asphalt shingles specified for the roof, but we have a really flat slope over this, I guess, non-piazza on the side and the awning in some of these areas. And I wasn't sure what kind of roof material would be going there due to the low slope. anyway, I mean, overall, I think it was very, there's a lot of considerations been put into the design, but I do think the roof is an outstanding issue that needs to be studied a little further.
Anybody else have stuff to add?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I think I would be more in alignment with Julia. I think your comments and Eddie's comments. I think the shed roof could work. It just, there's a lot of detailing that needs to be, you know, solidified here. So I nothing new to add.
I'm gonna try to float a motion for conceptual approval with condition to restudy the roof line. Should this be a deferral?
Yes.
Okay, deferral with board condition to restudy the roof line, restudy the north side fenestration, and refine the entry area detailing.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for deferral with staff comments noted and and board comments to restudy the roof line and the north side fenestration.
Lindsay, I actually didn't include staff's comments. Sorry, Kim.
Oh, so I revised that motion. So a motion for deferral with board comments to restudy the roof line and the north side fenestration. And what was that other board comment that?
Refine the entry area.
Thank you.
Details.
Do I have a second for Julia's motion?
I'll second. Eddie is going to second.
Thank you, Eddie. Put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Hunter?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Eddie?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Moving on to agenda item number 10, 17.5 Hanover Street. Pam, we'll give an intro.
Thank you. Just bear with me for a moment. All right, excuse me. 17.5 Hanover Street is requesting final approval for modifications and renovations. The building's a category 4 in the East Side neighborhood, constructed in 1913 and in the old city district. Here's an aerial showing the building right here. Strange. Here's some existing site photos. A couple different angles. This is looking south on Hanover, looking north. And these are the Sanborn maps from 1902 and 1944. Just going through the motions to find the age that it was constructed. There's a mention in the News and Courier for a bathroom addition by owner Ava Mccarthy in 1915, and then earlier there's an unknown address, but by Ava Mccarthy for new construction of 2-story wood building in 1902. On April 8th, 2021, the conceptual approval with staff comments was the motion. I'm not going to read these staff comments unless you want me to. But with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Byron Gettings and Eddie Bynes.
Good afternoon. My name is Byron Gettings. Thank you for hearing us. I want to start off with a little short piece of personal privilege. I really thought that you all gave a lot of in-depth consideration to 35 Devereaux Avenue. Mr. DaCosta was very close with my parents and close with me, encouraged me to become an architect. And I appreciate the thoroughness that you all deliberated to get through to that. And as a last mention, Mr. Bello and Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Huber, I appreciate this. Mr. DaCosta used to always tell me, Byron, I almost married your aunt when I was at Avery. I almost married her. So anyway, that's enough said, and we'll go on and talk about our project. We would like to start with the second drawing, please. The comments generated at the last meeting led us to add the additional columns requested to the front of the front elevation of the structure. And also we went ahead and balanced the column spacing on the piazza on the left side. Also, we adhered to your comments requesting to retain the original building walls as much as possible. So we had a wall that was we removed, but we put it back as requested by the board. The wood, we incorporated the wood railings and balustrade for the piazza railings and stairs, and followed through with introducing a hip roof over the second floor front porch. The other change that we incorporated was regarding the rear of the building. I think in our last meeting, it may have been a little bit misunderstood, but after the piazza, that area that protrudes out after the piazza, that's an addition to the house that was done. I was told by the owner it was done around the 1970s. And I just wanted to make that note that that is an addition. Our addition that we're proposing now, we have recessed it, indented it behind that to hopefully reflect the fact that it's not part of the original building. However, I think it works overall to the structure. If you, Kim, if you could go to slide number 5 and 6, well, 5, you can see the impact on the floor plan. This one is perfect. You can see the impact on the floor plan where we retained the existing historic wall. As you walk down the left piazza and approach the entry door, that after the entry door, we retained the wall that used to be there. So this is showing the impact it's had on the floor plan. It made the living room a little bit smaller, but we respect that need to keep the historic significance of the original structure. Going back to slide number 2, we have changed back to, we eliminated the PVC and incorporated wood trim and a hardy plank siding. And I think I'm learning now that there may be some issue with the hardy plank. If there is, we are open, of course, to change it to a wood siding. Underneath some of the building, there is some of the old wood siding, not over the entire building, but underneath the existing vinyl, there is some of it. And it appears to be a 1x5 novelty siding pattern. I can find 1x6 novelty at Southern Lumber, but not a 1x5. So we'd have to find that if we go back to that. Besides that, I think I may have hit all the comments that were generated at the last meeting. Yes, I think I have addressed the comments. And I do know that Ms. Robin Loudons is on the line and available to also speak. Okay.
Does Ms. Lowndes want to speak or
Mr. Bynes? Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is Eddie Bynes. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Bynes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you briefly. I'm with the Department of Housing and Community Development. And as all of you know, that housing, particularly affordable housing, is we are in crisis mode because of the fact that we can't do enough of it fast enough. We strongly support this particular project and would like to see it approved. And we are extremely pleased that the young couple that is doing this, no, first of all, Mr. Vernon Lyons, the owner, grew up in this house as a child and was raised by his grandmother in this house. And the house has been vacant for a number of years. So in this redevelopment of this property, they are creating 2 units, one of which will be housing for a low to moderate income person. And the term affordable these days means somebody that's working. So it's not low income housing per se, but it's to house a family that needs a place downtown where they can work and live, and without having to go all the way up to Somerville like me. I live in Somerville. Now, one of these units will be for a working type person that has, they're not on public housing, but they meet that standard of working and need a place to live. The other unit will be available to a more person that is market able to pay for and rent the house. What this does is afford this young family an opportunity to be able to renovate their property, keep it in their family, and serve as a role model for other people, particularly who are maybe to keep the community, make sure the community has a presence of minority folks still in the neighborhood, and so that the neighborhood remains diverse. That's important. They approached us about 2 years ago, and we've been working to find a way to help this family ever since. And the key thing is that, one, we create 2 available rental housing units for families, and that's number 1. And number 2, we can present and the opportunity for this housing development to be a role model for other persons of minority standing, that they can renovate their homes also. This will speed up the process, keep the community diverse, and at the same time, make things more very pleasing for the neighborhood. I might add that this house is directly in front of what used to be known as the Father Grant Center. Father Henry Grant used to house his office directly across from this building, and was very well known in the city of Charleston and worked very well on community issues. And so we just are glad that this young couple has decided to renovate this house, and hope that the plans that you see in front of you will be acceptable to this board. And we appreciate all the work you do. I'm good to see Mr. Bello. I hadn't seen him in a while. And also Ms. Martin. I hadn't seen her in a while, but anyway, that's just why I waited around this afternoon so I'd have a chance to speak to this group. And I apologize if my voice sounds hoarse, but it's because I've been enclosed in meetings all day. But so thank you very much. And I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bynes. I'm going to open it up. Are there any board questions?
This is Bill. I just have one very quick question for Mr. Gettings. It might just be a graphic thing. I'm just trying to understand the heights of the railings that we're seeing. They just look kind of tall graphically on this rendering that we're seeing, but it may just be an optical illusion.
Yes, I would definitely say it's an optical illusion. The code requirement is, I believe, 40 inches, and that's my intent to have them at that height.
36.
I think we can go to 36 on residential, so that's why it might have struck me a little bit high.
Okay, they're shown at 40. I could drop them down to 36. And thanks.
Good eye, Bill.
Pardon?
Good eye.
And it's a 2-inch gap at the bottom too, by the way, just to let you know that too. I don't know what they think's gonna squeeze under there, but yeah. But anyway, it looks great. Thanks for your work.
Thank you. Good.
Any other board questions? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Doesn't look like we have anyone speaking. We do have one letter. Attention BARS, May 13th, agenda item number 10, 17.5 Hanover Street. My name is Reverend Matthew Rivers, pastor of St. John's Chapel. I wanted to just say that I am in full support of the renovation at 17.5 Hanover Street. Thanks, Reverend Matthew Rivers. And that is it for public comment. Kim, would you give city staff comments and recommendations, please?
Thank you. The applicant followed the directives from the board and staff from the April 8th meeting, and the proposal has improved significantly since its conception. The cementitious siding as proposed is not appropriate, so we would ask for replacement in wood. Staff's recommending final approval of staff comments.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Gettings, did you want to respond to any of the staff comments?
My response would be in the affirmative, that we will replace the cementitious siding with wood, and that's no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Gettings. I'm going to open it up for board discussion and a vote.
Okay, well, I'll start. I think first, I wasn't around for the first review, but this is, I mean, you look at the house now, this is going to be great. And I love the fact that it's affordable, or workforce, or whatever the right term is, Mr. Bynes. But I think the project's great. My only comment is for Mr. Gettings. If you look at how the front porch is detailed, this isn't going to cost anything. It's just right now, I just looked at the details, and the beam is off center from the porch column, and then at the top, it's off center. And I think if you just go and study, just look across the street, at another piazza and just see how that column and beam relationship works, that'll make it ain't going to cost anything. It's just where you locate it. Yeah, look at this right here. See how that detail is?
Yes.
It's an easy thing to fix. That should be centered on the column should be centered on that beam. And then the transition there from first to second floor is easy just to pull that back a little bit. So it's just, to me, it's adjusting that detail, and it'll make all the difference in the world when you walk up to that porch. And that doesn't add any cost. It's just fine-tuning the detail. And then if you look at the front elevation, there's a column that comes down and there's no pier underneath it. So if you could put a pier underneath it, like next one. Yeah, see that one right there next to the stairs?
Yes.
I would just put a pier there and let the stairs die into that pier. So again, simple stuff, but I think will make a big difference when, as it presents itself on the street. So those are my only comments. I think it looks great. And I agree with staff about the cementitious siding, that it should be wood.
This is Bill. I'd say I agree with those comments from Eddie, and I would think those are minor. Staff could review those.
Right, sure.
So if everybody's okay, I'll make a motion for final approval with staff's comments and final review by staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor with final approval with staff comments and final review by staff. We have a second from Julia. So put it to a vote. Eddie?
Yay, approval.
Hunter?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Gettings and Mr. Bynes and Ms. Lowndes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on. The agenda item number 11 and 12 have been withdrawn by staff. We are on agenda item number 13, 11 Anson Street. Kim?
Thank you. "11 Anson Street is requesting new construction of two-story addition at rear and to south of the existing residence. It's a category 3 or 4 maybe in Ansonboro neighborhood circa 1889 and in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial for you to familiarize yourself with the location. It's at the intersection nearly of Anson and Pinckney. And just a couple images of the existing streetscape. This is looking down the driveway. Looking south on Anson and looking north on Anson. Sanborn maps from 1902 and 1944 show the building unchanged. And we have Mr. Glenn Keys, and I'll turn it over to him. You have the floor whenever you're ready to speak.
Great, thank you, Kim. Can you put up the first slide, please? Okay. So this is a very small house in Ansonboro. Next slide, please. It's a existing conditions of the house. With just 2 rooms with a dependency attached on the west side. Next slide. Next slide. So in the bottom left, you can see where the addition would be tucked behind the existing piazza. On the right side, you can see At one point in time, there was a shallow porch on this dependency, which was lost long ago. And we're proposing to put this addition in front of that, that dependency and tucked behind the existing piazza. Next slide. You can see an addition of a sunroom on the first floor that sets back behind the column line of the loggia. The addition will be minimally, if at all, visible from Anson Street through and behind the piazza. From Pinckney Street, it is 48 feet from Pinckney Street to the face of this sunroom, and it's overlooking a wooden fence and a masonry wall. So it would be a limited view from that side as well. Next slide. Second, this is proposed and existing. Next. Second floor, same, adding a closet above the sunroom. You can see it's only a two floors on the smaller house with almost no ability to have storage. So we're trying to create some reasonable storage for the homeowner. Next. So proposed and existing elevations. From the south side, you see it, and on the section looking east, you can see how it steps back behind the column line. Next. Can you go back one, Kim? This wall of the dependency has some severe structural issues. Russell Rosen has proposed that we have to take down the upper half of the wall and rebuild it. And so, or we can buttress the wall with this new addition. And we think that's the better solution to keep that wall and create a structure with this new addition that can buttress that wall. And Mr. Rosen is prepared to help us with that design. So we're asking for conceptual approval. Let me know if anything else I can answer for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keyes. Do any of the board members have questions at this time?
I have two. One, is there not a front elevation provided? Did I miss that?
I believe there is one, Kim.
This is the back. And then the other question is, I saw that there's a wood, the wood gates are going away and there's going to be wrought iron gates, which I assume are fairly transparent. Do we have any drawings for that?
That has not been determined. That will come with the landscape architect will be handling the site and the gates. And it's not clear whether those gates will be iron or be retained as wood.
Okay, thank you.
But regardless, if you look at the photograph, Kim, you go back to the first sheet with the photograph down the driveway. One more. In the middle one, Eddie, you can see, that was it.
I think you have a delay, or I have a delay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I went by there, so and I know the house. I just, I don't really have a good feel for what this is going to look like from this, I guess, east elevation without a drawing.
Just, can I interrupt for just a moment? In
Well,
September,
I think with the gate,
they had approval pending issues resolved for the rear for this gate here. So BAR Small gave them approval for this configuration after their rear issues are taken care of. And with the potential approval of this, the rear issues will be expunged.
okay. If we can go back to that photograph of the front, please. Sorry, I was not aware that this had been approved. But as you can see, Mr. Bello, we can certainly draw this elevation, but everything happens back of the piazza column line. So anything seen would be pretty minimal, I think, with the perspective, even with iron gates there. And it's a glass on the ground floor. It's essentially a glass sunroom. So can certainly provide more information, and that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
Any other board questions at this time?
This is Bill. I guess I have a question of staff, and maybe my recollection is, well, it's getting worse as I get older, but I thought I remembered at one point an application on this home to use some Philip Simmons gates that were found somewhere online that they were going to use and put here.
That was that. I'll open it up again. So this is
Kim.
Yes. This is the gate that they've, the owner has decided to use.
Kim.
Yes.
So I just got a text from the owner. She said those gates are no longer available. They've been purchased by someone else in Mount Pleasant. So there'll be a new design coming to you from Ms. Werdeman.
Any other board questions at this time? Okay, we will move on to public comment. We
have Erin Minnigan.
Thank you. Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We would like to thank the applicant for being in communication and walking us through the proposal. We are somewhat disappointed to see the change in approach from the previously approved design from, I believe, 2018, which restored the former porch and its footprint as seen on the Sanborn maps. However, we understand the current proposal is driven by zoning constraints and there are similar additions in the area. Given the most visible portion of the addition will be the second floor from Pinckney Street, we would encourage the upper floor to become more transparent and incorporate more glazing similar to the first floor to better reflect the porch that once existed in this location. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I think that's all we have for members for the public speaking, and I have a couple of letters here. The first is from James A. Rice at 62 Society Street. Dear Ms. Lavin, I'm writing to express my support for the addition dependency at 11 Anson Street in Charleston. Ms. Jernigan has shared her plans with me and my wife throughout the process and has kept us up to date and well informed of her plans to add a dependency at the back of her property. My wife and I have seen the proposed addition created by architect Glenn Keys, and I believe it to be in line with historic preservation additions we have seen in the Ansonboro neighborhood. We are also in agreement and in support of her courtyard hardscape proposal by Sheila Wertimer, as it will add green space in the Ansonboro neighborhood. We are in support of this addition to the back of her property. Best regards, James Wright. We also have a letter from Kelly and Dan Mena at 30 Pinckney Street. Kim Lavin, we are writing to express our support for the addition dependency at 11 Anson Street in Charleston. Ms. Jernigan has kept us up to date and well informed of her plans to add a dependency at the back of her property. We have seen the renderings proposed by architect Glenn Keys and believe it to be in line with the historic preservation additions we have seen in the historic district. We appreciate her honesty since our property overlooks her courtyard directly, where the addition will be. We are also in agreement and in support of her courtyard hardscape proposal by Sheila Wertimer, as it will add a much needed green space between our residences, allowing for some privacy as well. So with our property and privacy being the most impacted, we are in support of this addition to the back of her property. Sincerely, Kelly and Dan. And that is it for public comment. Kim, if you'll give city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thank you. The staff has a history of non-compliance, which has to do with the rear portion. If this proposal should be denied, the owner should be required to complete the after-the-fact repairs. That said, this house is small and on a small lot. There are examples of similar around the corner on Pinckney Street, which further extend over the driveway. Siding on the second floor should be more subtle, nickel gap siding or shiplap. And lastly, the east elevation should be included in the next submittal. Staff's recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Keys, did you want to respond or clarify anything with respect to the public or staff comments?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this point.
All right, well, I'll start. I think it helps me a lot knowing that there was a porch back there, and it would be helpful to know if this is extending further into that former footprint. I guess it is. And again, given Mr. Key's long history, I'm not overly concerned, but it is kind of hard to want to approve something when I don't know what it looks like. So that's a little bit tricky for me. The top floor is just going to be siding because it's a closet, and I'm guessing those windows are, up there, going to be covered either in clothes or there's going to be a curtain behind them forever. So anyway, I'm generally conceptually I'm fine with it. This has nothing to do with this application, but I don't think a wrought iron gate like that is appropriate on these houses. All of these houses right here, and Mr. Keys knows this as well as anyone, these are all very small. These were, kind of the working man's street here. And they were always very low key, not elaborate houses. And I think a very fancy wrought iron gate is inappropriate for the house. So I probably won't be here next time. So you can submit it next time, Glenn, and get it approved. But I'm just going to put that out there. I don't think it goes with the house. And it's just not in keeping with that side of Anson. Conceptually, though, with what you're asking for, I think it's okay. It's fine. So I would be okay with that going to staff.
Yeah, this is Bill, and Eddie, you do make a good point there. And I think maybe that's why I asked that question earlier about that, Philip Simmons gate, because I believe the discussion deliberation at that time was, well, that was not really appropriate. That style wasn't really appropriate, but I remember making the comment, well, if the owner has a chance to get it, I'd rather it be downtown than over at a house in Mount Pleasant. Exactly what I said. And now here we go. It's over at a house in Mount Pleasant. So, you know, that's unfortunate, but that was an exact discussion that my brain's not as bad as I thought. I do remember that. So, and I do agree, you know, with your statement on that. Given the street and the context of the street, I think that is a very, very salient and good point. And as far as what's proposed, I know that there have been a lot of things that have gone back and forth about this house. And there were a lot of major structural issues with that rear area. I do recall that. I believe that I could see a support of what is proposed, but I do think that potentially seeing more contextual drawings, especially from the street, would be good to see. So whether that would be coming before this board or before staff, I guess that's up for us to decide, but that's kind of my position. Thank you.
I agree, Bill and Eddie, and I think I'm comfortable with it being handled by staff from this point. Not the gate issue, but this proposed addition. So why don't I just make a motion like that? I make a motion for conceptual approval with final review by staff and staff comments.
I'll second that.
Eddie, all right, we have a motion from Julia on the floor for conceptual approval with final review by staff and staff comments, with a second by Eddie. I'll put it to a vote. Hunter?
Yes, in favor.
Bill?
Yay, in favor.
Julia?
Yay, in favor.
Bill? I'm sorry, Eddie.
Yay, in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Keys. Moving on to the
Thank you.
Moving on to the final agenda item tonight, because agenda item number 15 was withdrawn by staff. We are on agenda item number 14, 157 Wentworth Unit E. Kim?
Thank you. 157 Wentworth is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a 2.5-story house. It's in the Charleston Village and in the Oldham Historic District. There's a little bit of context for you. It's on the south side of the street near Colonial Lake. This is looking at the rear of the property. You can see here another structure is built right next to where this is going to be. So this is the property here. You can see the red rear shed roof. Here's some images of the house from the street. This is looking east on Wentworth and looking west. Excuse me, looking west. This is looking east. No. Sorry,
Yes,
this is looking east. Some historic images. Actually, this one is from 1996, so I don't know if we'd call that historic. But if Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Romano want to take it from here.
Hey guys, I am Tara Romano with Neil Stevenson Architects. We'll start out with this BAR application focuses on a new house at the rear of the property. However, the overall project will also involve the historic restoration and renovation of the main 3-story 1853 Greek Revival masonry structure at the front, as well as the 1853 carriage house. Flipping through a couple of the next pictures, you kind of showed this overview. That main house there at the front currently has 4 units, and the carriage house currently has 2 units. And then you can see there's a pretty large area left over at the rear of the property. And you can flip to the next one. And then the next one. And you can see here's the street view. You have a small commercial building to the right and another 3-story residential structure to the left. And then across the street, you have Fisher House, I think that's what it's called. And there's parking lot directly across the street and a few other houses off towards the left. Next slide. So this property has been left derelict and the structures have been neglected for many years. It's been an unpleasant sight for the neighbors and they have all let us know many times. The new owner wishes to bring the historic buildings back to life. He's planning to repoint the brick, repair the shutters, remove the window AC units, and repair historic exterior details. The interiors are grand and have much of the original historic fabric, including the original flooring and woodwork. So, you know, it'll take a lot of work, but the owner is excited to bring this property back to life. Just flipping through to show you the other structures on the property. This is a good example of how derelict it looks. And there's the carriage house on the back. Next one. You can see the main house in the background. It's a 3-story structure. The siding part you see is an addition that was put on the main house. You'll see on the Sanborns when that shows up. And then the carriage house at the rear. And then the next slide. So this is a space at the rear. Looking back, you can see, you can see the neighbor structure on the bottom photo there. And we'll talk about that as we go along. But overall, the project involves eliminating 1 unit from the main house. So they're going to go from 4 units to 3 units. And then the carriage house, they're also going to eliminate a unit to go from 2 to 1 unit. And then they'll build a new modest-sized single-family home in the rear. So the result will be a reduction from 6 units to 5 units on the property, which I know is really rare to hear of someone actually reducing units on the property. The location of the new house will be behind the carriage house and in alignment with that neighboring structure that you see in the center at on the bottom photo. The new house will be, just for perspective, the new house is going to be shorter than this neighbor's house, as like the eave is going to be 7 feet lower than the eave that you see there. And the ridge will be 4 feet lower than that structure there. Excuse me, pollen. You can also see in these photos, there's a large slab and remnants of walls and columns left over from old structures that used to fill the whole back of this lot. We can take a look at the Sanborns next, and you can see where those structures were on the back of the property. I think that one is a couple more slides. It's the driveway side of the house. And then next one, okay. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see, in 1902, you had the main house structure and the carriage house. And as the years went by, by 1944, the rear addition shows up on the main house, as well as some outbuildings in the rear. And then by 1955, you can see that the whole rear lot there is filled with garage structures, and that's what you saw in the photo. And then looking above this and looking at that existing site plan, you can see there's a concrete pad left, there's columns left, there's walls. So there are remnants and pieces left over on the site. Next slide. So going to the proposed site plan, showing the new footprint. The new house sits back from the edge of the main house as far as looking down the driveway type of view. And the new house is 152 feet back from Wentworth Street. Therefore, as you'll see in the renderings later, the house is barely seen from Wentworth Street. There's some glimpses of the front of it, and then, you know, some glimpses down the other neighbor's driveway, which we'll go through. The footprint, it sits within the required setbacks, and all the parking is situated at the rear. This was a request from the neighborhood association as the project developed. There's also a 5-foot deep landscape buffer down the entire right side of the driveway. And the lot coverage is kept to 39.7%, where a 50% lot coverage is allowable. So the site is not overdeveloped from lot coverage standpoint. The layout complies with all the zoning requirements. And again, the owner is reducing from 6 units to 5. Next slide. So this sheet shows the site section and area plan. We are in a 3-story height district, and per the height ordinance, we've designed the new house to be subservient to the main house. Also, in meeting with the BAR staff, we discussed that the BAR has the authority to downgrade the home from 3 stories to 2.5 stories. Therefore, we reduced the design to 2.5 stories. Most of the surrounding houses you can see on the area plan are 3 stories. Some of them are 2.5 stories. And the exception really is the carriage house, which is 2 stories. The carriage house back there, you know, it's kind of tricky. And we had numerous discussions with the groups about the fact that the carriage house only has 7'6" high ceilings, and it's sitting right on the ground. So, you know, there was some discussion that it would be unreasonable to base the height of the new structure on the carriage house height. And at the same time, I think the language of the code says you need to be subservient to the main house, and we've kept this new house pretty subservient, you can see, to that main house.
Just remind you about 2 minutes left. Just a heads up.
Okay, got it. Thanks. The new house is also subservient to the neighboring rear house. You can see in the blue dashed lines right behind it. Again, our eaves are 7 foot lower than that house, and our peak is 4 foot lower. This is a Charleston single house design. It's 16 foot wide at the front part that you see here, the 7 foot deep porch, and then the portion that faces the carriage house is 14 foot wide to align with that corner of the carriage house, which you can see on the area plan. It has 9 foot ceilings on the first floor and 8'6" ceilings on the second floor. Going to the next slide. These are the BAR right-of-way views. The number 1 is down the driveway, number 2 is the neighbor's driveway, and number 3 you'll see is from Buffane Street. Next slide. This is the view from Wentworth Street. Again, the house is 152 foot back from the sidewalk, and the parking is all set to the rear, and there's landscaping down the entire side of the driveway. Next slide. This is the view from the neighbor's driveway on the left. It's pretty far back there, and this view is also, it's mainly blocked by the carriage house. And you can also see that rear house of the neighboring property is higher than this new house. Next slide. This is the view from Buffane Street. If you look at the photograph down at the bottom, you can see that black roof in the background. That's the neighbor's house. So I think the rendering makes it look a little closer than the actual view that you see in the photograph. But the house is 174 feet back from Buffane Street. And again, it's lower than that adjacent neighbor's house. And we've been discussing with the owner actually going with a color palette, maybe that makes the house blend in a little more and disappear some darker colors. The next slide.
Just a reminder, we're over time, so.
Can I get 30 more seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. This is not actually a BAR right away, but I think in discussions with staff, they thought it'd be helpful to show that. Next slide. These are the floor plans, and I think we can, they're basic living areas on the first floor, 2 bedrooms on the second floor. Next slide. And then you have attic space on the 3rd level, which is a half level. And then finally, the next slide. For the elevations, we have smooth fiber cement lap siding and trim, cementitious stucco base, with louvers under the porch. And just to close it, we've met with and received a lot of positive feedback from the immediate neighbors here. We've also had numerous meetings with the neighborhood association, BAR staff, and historic groups. We started this with a 3-story building, larger footprint house, and it's evolved, into a smaller building along the way based on feedback and collaboration. Again, this house is 152 foot back from Wentworth Street and is mostly hidden by other structures. And the owner is excited to bring this property back to life, and the overall improvements he feels are going to be of good benefit to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Romano. Do my fellow board members have any questions at this time? All right. Moving on to public comment. We have Erin Minnigan speaking.
Thank you. Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We would like to thank the applicant for reaching out and being responsive to our feedback. This project has been through a few iterations and we feel has progressed in a positive direction. In particular, the location and scale of the footprint is much improved and we are generally comfortable with the height, scale, and mass of the building. However, we do feel some refinement is needed on the architectural direction as we feel the building currently appears too suburban. Given the building has a traditional design, we feel the building should also be traditionally detailed. We encourage the applicant to continue to study and refine the materials, proportions, and detailing of the building. In particular, the roofing, dormers, eaves, and window and door openings to better relate to the existing buildings on site and the context. 2 specific suggestions we would make at this time is to continue the porch over to the outer edge of the house to allow greater visibility of the porch from the right-of-way, and to incorporate a green space buffer along the west elevation to help mitigate visibility of the foundation and the flood fence. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. We also have April Wood speaking.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has met with the applicant and has reviewed the request for conceptual approval for the construction of a new 2.5-story house at the rear of 157 Wentworth Street. We are concerned that the proposed new structure is located too close to the historic dependency structure and therefore is not sufficiently subordinate or respectful of this historic structure. However, we understand that the applicant has unsuccessfully attempted a zoning variance that could have resulted in a further separation of the buildings. To reduce the impact of the proposed new structure, we recommend removing the gable that faces the dependency gable. So that the interior stair can reach the 3rd floor, we suggest installing a shed dormer at this location, similar to the shed dormer proposed on the south elevation. The proposed north elevation dormer can be modified to match and should be centered on the windows below. On the south elevation, we recommend resizing the small 2nd floor porch windows so that it is consistent with the other windows on this elevation. Thank you.
Thank you, April. We also have some letters. The first is from the Charleston Village Association. Dear members of BARS, we have reviewed the application for the construction of a new single-family residence at the rear of the property at 157 Wentworth Street, an important 1853 Greek Revival masonry residence in our neighborhood. We look forward to the applicant moving forward with its restoration with hopes that the piazzas will be reopened or developed in a more sensitive enclosure. We appreciate the efforts of the owner and architect as we see the scale of the new building has been reduced and upper porches and decks were removed with the latest design. However, the new site section shows a building whose height, scale, mass, and overall design direction warrant further study. Please consider the following points. We feel that the new building is still incongruous with the main house and existing historic structures on the property. Relative to scale, the building is taller than the dependency directly adjacent to it due to its third floor. Stylistically, it appears that the current design shares no details and takes no inspiration from the historic structures on the property. The new building does not relate to the main house in the hierarchy of form traditionally found with dependency structures throughout Charleston Village, making it conspicuously out of place. We would like the board to pay special attention to the south facade. This side will be the most publicly visible part of the structure, which will be easily viewed from Dufain Street. As for the land plan, we suggest that the brick apron continue to the corner of the main structure to further contain the gravel parking area. We would also like to see space for a landscaped area at the base of the new structure rather than bringing the gravel up to the foundation wall. We appreciate the opportunity to submit our thoughts. We look forward to seeing the design evolution when this comes back to the board for subsequent reviews. Sincerely, the BAR BZA Committee at the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. We also have a letter from Faye Griffin, to whom it may concern. I reside and am a property owner at 151 Wentworth Street. As a neighbor and concerned property owner, I would like to register my full support for the planned development and construction of a new residence in the rear of the home at 157 Wentworth Street. That property has been derelict for far too long and has been an eyesore in the neighborhood. I have reviewed the plans for the restoration, construction, and strongly believe that this development would be a real positive step for our area. All the property owners at 151 Wentworth are anxious to see this plan approved by the BAR. Thank you, Faye Griffin. Last, we have a letter from I think I've already read this. Sorry. Yep. Apologies, that's a duplicate letter. That is all the public comment we have. Kim, if you will give city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thank you. The height, scale, and mass is appropriate. The general architectural direction seems to be traditional, but retains some suburban elements that aren't appropriate for the neighborhood, especially from Dufain Street. The bays on the two-story porch should be more vertical in nature, and details refined to align with the principles set forth by the BAR. Restudy the fenestration to better relate to the bay proportions. Shed dormers should be eliminated in favor of a traditional dormer, such as the one on the north. Pitches of the dormer and roof lines should be consistent, and in general, simplify all details for consistency. Staff's recommending conceptual approval with staff comments.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Mana, did you want to respond to any of the public comment or staff comments?
Actually, I was going to offer the rebuttal if that's appropriate. I'm Neil Stevenson, Neil Stevenson Architects, and I'd say in general, we've met with all the neighbors in the vicinity, and have had several Zoom meetings with the other neighbors, and we've been listening to feedback. You can see on the Sanborn maps that the historically having buildings close to each other and kind of packed into the back is relatively common, especially look in this area. We did try to move this a little further back from the carriage house. And as Tara said, the carriage house is challenging as far as trying to keep the subservience. So the subservience really is based on the massing of the main house, which we've gone over and over. I think that we're getting close. I agree with the Historic Charleston Foundation suggestions of maybe reducing that gable and doing something more. I don't think a shed roof is necessarily out of place here. I think that offers some benefits, and if you look in this neighborhood, there are many examples of shed roofs.
Shed dormers.
I mean, shed dormers. Yes, sorry. So I would disagree with that as far as I don't know if that rear house should be completely a replica of what's going on in front of it. The styles are already different, and you can see that the house that's to our east there, which this board has approved is drastically different from the house behind it. To set different standards for us would not be quite fair. So just keeping in mind again that this is 154 feet back from 152 feet back from Wentworth, looking down driveways, and then in the rear part from Bufane, we're 174 feet back, which is pretty significant. From there, you really can't even relate this building to anything else except for what's on Bufane Street. But in general, we're all for studying the details and making them more historically correct if that's the issue. But I think that we're based on the zoning that we've got and the situation that we've got, we're happy with the main direction of what we're dealing with for the design. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. All right, let's move into board discussion and a vote.
This is Bill. I'll start. Just full disclosure, my firm designed the home that Mr. Stevenson referenced at the adjacent property to the east. That's in the back of the property. That particular lot was parceled almost as a postage stamp under the guidance of Ray Huff, and we were given that area to establish that design. And it is different than the front structure. And I do see room for that type of interpretation on this property as well. I think what I'm definitely in agreement with staff's comments. I guess the main comment that's catching me is I feel like the house is, as designed, sort of caught in limbo right now. It does have kind of a feel that it's well, it's not full on historic in response to the front historic structure, and it's not contemporary, which I know Mr. Stevenson's firm has the ability to do very well. It's sort of caught in no man's land right now to me. Kind of looks like maybe a house you'd see an eye on or somewhere like that. And I don't know if necessarily trying to replicate historic details is totally appropriate, because I think to the degree it might be appropriate to the front house, it might even give a false sense of history if you went too far with it. So me personally, I could see even a solution that got a little away from some of that, maybe got a little more of a cleaner lined solution that may be viable. But as far as height, scale, and mass, I agree with staff. I think it's there. I think it's appropriate. I think it's down to just the detailing and material palette that is used.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I agree with what you're saying, Bill. I was thinking the same thing. They're kind of in between. You know, Mr. Stevenson, he didn't want it to be a replica, and it's not. And I'm right there with you, but it's sort of in this weird, is it traditional or not? And I think just the development of it will go a long way. I mean, one of my pet peeves is seeing a dormer with siding on either side of the windows. You know, either the dormer needs to get smaller or the windows need to get bigger. It shouldn't have lap siding up there. Just simple little things like that. And you know, I know if y'all just develop it more, it'll be fine. And I would echo kind of what Bill said. Maybe the direction is to go, I don't want to strip it down, but maybe just a little cleaner, a little more contemporary. And then you're clearly not trying to match any of the old stuff, but it's just detailed and developed nicely, which I know y'all can do. The only other thing I was going to say, I looked at the site plan, and you've got looks like a 10-foot setback, but you're 12 feet away where the steps are. So it seems, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems like right away you can move it 2 feet over, and maybe a couple of those steps on that back porch could eat into the porch a little bit, and you get another, 20 inches or something. So suddenly you're almost 4 feet further to the back in between the carriage house and this building. I mean, maybe I'm overlooking something, but that seems kind of easy to do and really wouldn't impact much.
There's a building setback line. We're hard against the building setback
You
line.
are, okay.
Yeah, that's just the porch, the additional porch setback.
Oh, so the building can't move.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, well.
locked in.
I should have known it was not that easy. All right, well, anyway, the height, scale, and mass, I don't have any issue. I do agree. I just think the development, I think it could be a lot nicer of a house if y'all just, just sort of tightened it up a little bit. But I'd be fine with conceptual approval.
I have nothing to add.
May I ask Eddie a quick question? Conceptual, I agree with height, scale, and mass. It's the GAD that I'm just wondering about that part.
I don't think the architectural direction, I think we're all kind of, and I'm guessing that Ms. Romano and Neil Stevenson probably agree. I don't know that, but just my guess is they agree that it could probably go that way. I don't think the direction that we're talking about is enough to not approve conceptually. It's not like I look at this and go, oh, this shouldn't be approved. It's more, I just know it can be a lot stronger. And the comments aren't that different from what everyone else has said, the Preservation Society and staff. It's just which direction do they go in with the detail. So I'm fine with the general architectural direction, maybe with those comments.
Yeah, and I guess that's along the lines of what I was thinking. It's kind of a refinement of detail. And again, the material palette I think is very important as well. Asphalt shingles and cementitious siding, that kind of plays into the sort of ambiguity of the design right now. I think a refinement of that is just as important as a refinement of the detail.
Sure, I agree with that. Sounds like a motion, Bill.
Well, then go for it, Eddie.
All right. I will move for conceptual approval for the height, scale, and mass and the general architectural direction with further study as it's developed of the architectural detailing per board comments and at least a consideration of how the materials are handled. I don't know that they need to come back with a metal roof, but I think some of those materials you could probably just explore some other options. So hopefully that wasn't too ambiguous.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval of height, scale, and mass and general architectural direction.
I'll second.
Kim, did you get the rest of that motion?
I did, with further architectural detailing per board comments and consideration of materials. Does that sound good, Eddie?
Yes, I apologize for it being so long.
And I apologize. Who provided a second to that motion?
Bill, and I apologize for cutting you off, Lindsay. So a lot of apologies all around.
You were just excited, so I understand.
And hungry.
I will put it to a vote. Hunter?
Yay, in favor.
Julia?
I'm going to abstain on this one.
All right. Eddie?
Yay, in favor.
Bill?
Yay, in favor.
Chair votes with the majority. And with that, the motion passes with 4 voting for and 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Eddie and Hunter, thanks for jumping in tonight. It's nice to have you guys both here.
Yeah, it was good to do that once. I like it. I'll see y'all in 6 months.
Yeah, likewise.